Nancy, who are you and what do you do?
I am Nancy O'Dell. First and foremost, I am a mom to an absolutely wonderful 17-year-old daughter. She's also a major volleyball player. She's going to be playing volleyball in college, so I would call myself a volleyball mom too, because pretty much every weekend you will find me at a volleyball tournament somewhere watching her play. And then I am probably known career-wise, obviously, as a TV host. I started in a smaller market in Charleston, South Carolina, and then Miami doing the crime beat, police beat, which a lot of people don't know. So that was in hard news, and then made the transition to entertainment and hosted Entertainment Tonight for a decade and Access Hollywood before that for 13 years. And now I host a show called Crime Exposé. And it is basically takes you into the true crime genre that everybody seems to love these days and enjoy. And I think it's because a lot of women learn what not to do or what they can do to prevent something from happening to them. So it's kind of taken me back to my roots, which has been a lot of fun. And that's what I do now. And also I am a philanthropist, which is always a hard word to say. But I am a big supporter of Augie's Quest. My mom passed away from ALS, and so I want to help do everything I can to raise money for research to help find a cure, and also a big supporter of Best Buddies, which is gets people with intellectual disabilities out there and forms one-on-one friendships so that they don't lead an isolated life, and it's a wonderful charity. So.
What's something outside of journalism that excites you right now?
Something outside of journalism, I know I'd have to say watching the volleyball matches of my daughter. It's just so much fun to see her excel at something that she loves doing. And every time I go, I'm, that mom on the sideline that's cheering and probably videoing every single shot that she makes. And she can slam the ball pretty hard. So she's a strong hitter. So it's a lot of fun. So it does excite me to see her enjoy something so much and to excel at it.
You've done everything from reporting to producing. What's one thing you haven't done yet but would love to try?
Gosh, that's a good question. Maybe singing. I don't know how good I would be at it, but I think that would be a lot of fun. I also am a huge sports person. I love to play all kinds of sports. So there's probably some kind of sport out there that I would love to be able to master. Because I've dabbled a little bit in almost all the sports, but I'm sure there's one that I would like to take to the next level. I guess maybe the sport now, what is it that everybody's playing? The tennis, a mini version of tennis? Pickleball. Why couldn't I think of pickleball? I need to master pickleball. Pickleball master. It's my next job.
What's the biggest learning experience you've had?
The biggest learning experience that I've had is probably one that I just had yesterday, believe it or not, because my daughter looked at me and said something that meant so much. And it was, you always make these decisions. And I left Entertainment Tonight with 1 year left on my contract. And it was a tough time in my life. I was going through a divorce, and my biggest priority was my daughter. And I wanted to make sure that she was okay with everything. And so I make sure that I attend to all of her events. And you never know if they even notice, right? Or they appreciate it, if you're there or not. And I remember when I was hosting Access Hollywood, I would literally go to this service they would have before her kindergarten and first grade and second grade, and they would have it every morning. And I would go in curlers because I had to go straight and host the show, but I would go because I wanted to be there for her. And again, you never know if they notice. And so I learned yesterday, because she was telling me about a friend of hers who had been disappointed that her parents hadn't showed up at something. And she looked at me and she said, "Mom," she goes, "I never have to worry whether you're gonna be there or not." And so I learned yesterday that actually means so much to her, and that meant obviously a lot to me. So she said, "Thank you for always being there." And I said, "Of course."
What's a cause that's important to you?
There's several causes that are important to me. I mentioned a couple of them. ALS research is a huge one because my mom passed away from ALS, and she was one of the sweetest people you would ever meet and one of the most kindest people you would ever meet. And it took her way too early. And so I would love to help be able to find a cure in some way by raising funds. So I've been doing a lot to support that through Augie's Quest, who is another wonderful man who passed away from ALS, but it's in his honor, that charity, and it's a great charity that does a lot for research, and also Best Buddies. So Best Buddies is it is an organization that forms friendships, as I mentioned, with people of intellectual disabilities. And my aunt was a person with Down syndrome. And so she was literally my best buddy growing up, even though we are obviously completely different ages.
When do you feel the most inspired?
I think that when I feel the most inspired is when I get that feeling inside of me, like just a gut feeling like this is right. And I think it's when people do good. I think that one of the things that frustrates me the most is people who are not kind, people who are only out for themselves. And I think when you meet people who seem to do things for others and do it very genuinely, I get really inspired. One of those people that's an obvious one to talk about, but I can tell you, having interviewed her many times, is Oprah. And she means what she says when she tries to help others. And she had a situation growing up where it could have been a tough life and she could have taken another path, but she didn't. She chose to take this other path and do a lot of good for others. And she's a strong woman. And so I would say she's very inspiring to talk to and to see how much good she does with the celebrity that she has gained.
What's one thing people don't know about you?
I'm a pretty badass ping pong player. I think people might not know that about me. I can do some damage on the ping pong table. I played it all the time with my dad growing up. And so he got to the point where he thought it was really funny for me to play all of his friends and to beat them. So he would encourage it. So that was really funny. I think another thing that people just say not know or surprise them.
They don't know.
Don't know. I think another thing that people would not know is that I once posed in an undercover sting as a prostitute in Charleston, South Carolina. Okay, there's one for you, right? Okay, so back in my old days when I was in Charleston, South Carolina and Miami, I would do the crime beat, the police beat. So I would go on all these stings with the police and we would cover it for the news. And so of course, obviously it didn't go past the street, but they were showing that how even in this small southern city that it did exist. And so I had to dress up as when I was standing next to an undercover cop. And so you couldn't do entrapment, meaning that you had to let them tell you what they want and then offer something for it. And so I had an earpiece so I could hear the cops and the detectives telling me things that I needed to say or do. And so, but the one thing they didn't tell me is the lingo that is used. And so I had one guy come up and he said, I went around the world. And I kind of had a baffled look on my face because I wasn't sure what that was. So the cop was telling me in the ears, what that was, which is basically everything that you wanted. And so he then said, for $50. And I must have looked at him like, $50? And I heard in my ear, like these cops laughing so hard in my ear because apparently I guess I thought that, I was worth more than $50. So, so from now on, my nickname at the Charleston Police Department is $50.
What's your current TV character obsession?
Oh, current TV character obsession. That's a good one. Well, it's always Schitt's Creek. Like I'm obsessed with Schitt's Creek. Like I could watch that over and over and over and it just makes me laugh. So any character on Schitt's Creek is, if I ever need cheering up, I will tune that in. And I just think that all of those actors and actresses on that program just do a brilliant job. Like they just develop their characters so much and just make you laugh and it's a good time.
How would you define yourself in 3 words?
Define myself in 3 words. Kind. Sometimes I want to be a bitch. I tell people that. Not to people who, are super nice and everything, because most people are. But, when somebody just says something a little off or cutting or whatever, and you kind of want to like have a quick comeback, I can never do it. I saw it on Instagram the other day. The word of the day was ambitious. It's the ambition to become a bitch sometimes to people who need it, right? So it's like, I kind of want to be ambitious sometimes if I need to, and then I can't because then I feel bad later if I ever say anything, even though if it's deserved. So I hope to be kind. I try to be kind. I would say not ambitious, but ambitious. I do enjoy the career that I've had. I've been very lucky to have a great career, and I like to be involved in all the aspects with the Crime Exposé. One of the producers, and I have incredible producers that I work with Hank Cohen and Scott Sternberg, and we get together and we collaborate, and it's just made for, I think, a really incredible show with such great stories. So I like to be involved in the writing and the producing, and so I would say that would be a part of it. And the other one, I call myself probably motherly. Like I like to take care of people I would say that yes, or motherly would be another one.
What's the most adventurous thing you've ever done in your life?
That's a good question. Most adventurous thing. Um, we went to Switzerland on a trip, and they had the Huskies walk us on these very kind of treacherous mountains. And the reason they have the Huskies is because it's really hard to get up in the snow with the Huskies. And little did I know that those Huskies are probably as strong as 10 men. I mean, they are incredibly strong, and they get very excited and they jump up and down. Now you're right next to a cliff and you're looking down going like, I hope they're sure-footed. Like maybe I need like a horse or a donkey right now because I'm with the Huskies and they're strapped to you all over, I'm pulling you up this mountain. And so it felt a little treacherous. So I would say that that's probably one of the most adventurous things that I have done, but it was exhilarating and I'm so glad that I did it and we had a wonderful time doing it.
What's inspiring you in life right now?
Inspiring me in life right now. I know I bring my daughter up a lot, but I'll say one thing that I've seen her do recently is that she's a huge volleyball player that I told you. And one thing that I've noticed on her is she doesn't have many bad games, but if she has a bad game, she doesn't let it affect her. And I thought, what a great lesson in life. Like, something can not go your way, and then the very next game or the very next day for us adults, right, can be totally different. And it's kind of about your attitude. So she doesn't let it get to her head. And I think that that's one thing that I've seen her do that's very inspiring.
What's your pet peeve?
My pet peeve. Well, I think you could call this a pet peeve. LA traffic is definitely a pet peeve of mine. I can't stand the fact that you have to allow an hour, even if you're going 10 miles. That drives me insane. I grew up in South Carolina, so traffic was much simpler, let's just say. So that, it kind of interferes with having time to go visit with friends and stuff. And the traffic would be another, and the people in the traffic also. I swear, people in LA, you will be at a stoplight and the light will turn red. And if you don't move within a millisecond, they're horning at you. And that drives me insane. I'm like, I never will forget. I was not that long ago back in South Carolina, and I was distracted and I was on the phone and I realized, oh my gosh, I just sat here at a stoplight and the stoplight changed on me and went back, from red to green to red, and I didn't move because I was so distracted and on the phone. And not a single person behind me beeped or anything. I'm like, okay, LA, we gotta get it together. No more beeping at these stoplights. Like the minute it turns green, you can't do anything. That's a pet peeve.
What's something you notice about someone when you first meet them?
Something that I notice about somebody when I first meet them is if they have kind eyes or not. And if they are engaging and, look you in the eye when they're talking. I think that's very important. But I really do. One of the things that I first notice is I like somebody who's got kind eyes. And I think it's not just the physical build of their eyes. I think it's really says something about the person inside.
You started your career as a crime reporter. How did that experience help you transition into entertainment news?
Well, yes, I started my career as a crime reporter in Charleston and then in Miami doing investigative in the police beat. And it's just great storytelling. And that's why, I love Crime Exposé right now so much, is because the stories, it's, a story of somebody who went through something, and it's basically one murder per episode with resolve at the end. So you find out how the detectives and the police were able to solve that murder, which is the most fascinating thing, and which is why I say the hard news really helped me develop those skills as a journalist. And you have to do that too when you're in entertainment. So if you're interviewing a celebrity, you have to be able to tell their story of that movie that they're on or that show that they're on, and their character and how they got to be there and why they chose that role. And it's all about telling a story. And it's one of the reasons that I love journalism so much, because it's ever changing, because the stories are ever changing. So you may interview George Clooney 50 times, but it's always on a different set, at a different place. He's playing a different character. He's at a different point in his life. And so I think everything about, having done hard news, and especially because you have to turn it around so quickly. And I was responsible for doing, because it was a smaller market, all the writing and even some of the editing and the producing, and you learn a lot. And so it will help you, with anything when you go forward, and whether it be entertainment, and now back to my roots, true crime to crime expose.
How did your time in entertainment news help you transition back into true crime?
Probably because a lot of the celebrities commit crimes. No, I'm just kidding. That was a joke. It helped me transition back because, again, it's all about telling the story. And so with true crime, it's even more so of a story, because you're telling the story not just of a person who is an actor and playing a character. You're telling the story of true people, and you are telling their story, and you've got to be really, careful and listen to everything that they have to say. And then also make sure that you're getting out the message to people watching, how that story transpired, and also that hard work of the detectives and the police officers, and how they got to getting a resolve and to be able to get the person who committed this horrible crime off the streets. And so it really helped me. Both of them are interchangeable in the fact that you're always telling a story, but to be able to go back to true crime is something that I've always wanted to do, because I always really, really loved it, because the storytelling was so a big part of the show, which it is, of crime expose.
Was there a mentor or someone early in your career who gave you advice that stuck with you?
Absolutely. I had several. From the producer that I had in Charleston, South Carolina, who was this incredible writer. And she would always tell me, make sure when you tell the story, tell it in a different way. And then when I went to Miami, my general manager, his name was Don Brown, it was at WTVJ, he was also this great storyteller. And he told me that whenever you tell a story, do it in a different way. And I'll never forget, when I went to cover a story about, they were shooting a movie in Miami, and speaking of traffic and all that good stuff, the stunt man was doing his part, and he backed up traffic in Miami, and people were getting frustrated, as I do in the LA traffic sometimes. And so I started off with a story because I knew everybody was getting frustrated, but to tell it in a different way, I told it from the stunt man's perspective. So I said, here's the guy who's making you all angry. It's this stunt guy, but it's not his fault. It's just a job. So, and then we kind of went backwards from there and kind of telling his story, but it was an easy way and a more interesting way of telling the story without just saying, hey, you got traffic jams in Miami, which is, kind of a way you would normally start, but you just got to think of a different way of doing it.
What's a funny or unexpected mistake you made early in your career that you can laugh about now?
Obviously, I laugh about it. I don't know if I should tell this one or not, but it is kind of funny. Well, there's two stories, I should say. When I was in Charleston and I was hosting, so I was anchoring, and it was one of my very first shows, and they had the chairs that you would sit at the anchor's desk, and they had like the rolling, wheels, so you could kind of roll around. So I was, probably uncomfortable and nervous, and I was rolling around a little bit. Well, my microphone, it wasn't wireless, it was wired, so it got caught underneath the chair. And so the mic came off, and I could hear, in my earpiece that I wasn't being broadcast, that, I was speaking, but I could hear that it wasn't being transmitted. And of course I had a producer that was coming in and saying, like, you gotta get your microphone, you get your mic back on. And so I could feel my co-host on the other side. He was like pulling my chair, trying to get off. So my first few things on the set, I was like this. People probably thought, like, what's wrong with her? But then my co-anchor came over, and he was going underneath the desk to try and get the microphone so that he could hand it back to me. Meanwhile, I'm trying to read really loudly and keep the story going. So then they cut back to a 2-shot, and you see that my co-anchor is underneath the desk, like down at, you know what I'm trying to say. That just did not look right. So it's just one of those crazy days. So it was like, we had to explain that, my microphone came off, and that was a funny story. Another one I remember too is I was doing the live Golden Globe show, and it was raining, and I had worn a strapless cashmere dress. Well, let me just tell you, don't ever wear cashmere in the rain, because the more rain it gets on the bottom of the dress, the heavier the dress gets. And if you don't have straps, the entire time, that was all I could worry about, is that, I was gonna have an issue with the dress coming down. And so that was kind of an embarrassing moment because I was just live, just constantly pulling out my dress to make sure that I was not exposing anything I should not.
You're the host of Crime Exposé. What first got you hooked on diving into these intense murder cases?
I have always been a fan of, you watch like Dateline and they have these stories where you just get wrapped in it and you don't know who it is. You don't know if it's the boyfriend. You don't know if it's the wife. You don't know if it's a coworker. You don't know if it's a stranger. And it's fascinating to me, probably because of my crime background, but I think anybody who watches it to see the methods that are involved to getting to the bottom line. And I remember on Crime Exposé, just one of these clever detectives, they do so much is that the shoe print left at the scene was a man's size 7, I think, or something like that. And he knew it was an unusually smaller size. And he happened to be interviewing one of the suspects and he looks down to check his size foot. And that's actually what put him as the prime suspect. Then of course they did all the DNA and the footprints and everything they needed. But he cleverly asked the guy, like, oh my gosh, I really like your shoes. Like, what size shoe do you wear? And the guy's like, a size 7. And the cop's not trying to not give it away, but that's really kind of how we got to there. So just to hear the methods that they use to find the people who have committed these crimes, and then again, everything that you can learn from it. So it, to me, is just fascinating. Again, it's just fascinating storytelling, and that's not just what we do with Crime Exposé, but the police officers, the detectives who basically have to tell the story then to a jury to get the person convicted. So they have all this big storytelling job as well that they need to do to get across all the points that they need to get across, to get across all the facts that they need to get across, and in a way that the jury can understand so that they can come up with the proper verdict.
After all the stories you've heard, is there one case that's really stuck with you?
There's been so many that have stuck with me because they're just all, they're all pretty insane. I remember one, and I think it just was personal because I've had a lot of things that have been going on in my house lately, and I've had to have a lot of people come to work on the house. I've needed a lot of work from basically strangers, people that are coming to work on my pool because it needs construction work, people that are working on the side of the house because it needs some waterproofing. And realizing something so what seems innocent and letting these people in your house. And we had this one lady who, same situation, she was having work done on her house. And it was a contractor or a worker that was coming in her house. So he basically had access to the house. He knew all the vulnerable points because they had to actually punch a hole in one of the windows to have access to it to fix somehow. So he knew that there was a hole in the window. And he basically came back and wound up murdering her. But it just made me feel like, it just made me feel really vulnerable in the fact that sometimes you do have to let these complete strangers into your home, and what can you do to prevent that? And so on Crime Exposé, we actually were giving a lot of tips of how you can find out about people's backgrounds, simple ways to find out if they've ever been convicted before. And in this case, the man had been convicted of some pretty horrible things before, but had gotten out of prison and was doing this side work. And so I think it's just those stories that you realize, wow, this could happen to me. Those are the ones that really kind of shock you and stick with you.
When you're interviewing family members of victims, how do you keep it together?
When I hear the family member stories, it's always really tough because, again, you hear the care in their voice and you hear how hurt that they have been. And so when I listen to them tell the story, it is tough. But then you realize it's also giving them a vehicle to get out information that they want to. We have this one story of, and again, this is something that could happen to anybody in this profession, or a profession that where you actually have to take strangers into, an empty building or something. So it was a realtor, and the person who wound up murdering her posed as a client. He knew that she was a pretty wealthy realtor and came from a wealthy family. And so he decided he was going to kidnap her and then hold her for ransom. And then wound up, when the plan didn't go right, he wound up murdering her. And the son has started this whole foundation in her honor. And so in a way, you can hold it together because it gives the family members a vehicle to be able to speak about their loved one, and even if it's just to remember them. But a lot of them want to get the information out, maybe help people to help prevent it from happening to them. And in this case, the Sun has started this wonderful foundation where it educates realtors and other people who have, say that they are in charge of a warehouse and they have to go show, these units to people, and they have to go show it to them alone and unlock it, let them see it. And it's a storage unit. We had one of those stories on the show where somebody was murdered that way. But like I said, the Sun then has started this great foundation, and it teaches realtors and people who have to go off as strangers into empty spaces, some things that they can do to help prevent crimes from being happened to them.
What's the most challenging part about telling such intimate, often painful stories?
I think a challenging part of it is just feeling what they feel. It's tough. I mean, when you hear some of these stories, but again, you really get involved in the stories because the storytelling is so enthralling, and to hear, sometimes it's just shocking that people can behave the way that they do, and that they actually are these people out there who commit these horrible crimes. So it's really tough. I mean, I will say it's very tough to get through some of the stories, but I know it's necessary, and it's storytelling, and I think people need to know some of these things that are taking place. And it does, I think the reason that true crime is such a popular genre, and the reason that Crime Exposé has done so well, is because people want to hear that story from beginning to end. And it's fascinating that some of these things can actually happen, but then to see the process that the cops and the detectives go through, and the extreme method that they use, and the scientific ways that it's just fascinating. And it's necessary for them to do it. And so to be able to see them to do this work and them tell the story of how they were able to find out who the perpetrator was, is just, it helps me to get through all of it, because I know it is doing some good and you see their hard work.
Is there a particular case that made you view the justice system in a different light?
All of our cases on the show are solved. So the satisfaction that you get in putting these perpetrators behind bars is very satisfying, because like I said, we don't leave you hanging. It's a half an hour. And so we tell the story from beginning to end, and who has committed the crime by the end of the show. There's a lot of people along the way who are suspects, and we go through all of that. But in the end, you know who they are and who is charged. I think that there have been a few stories where you're surprised that they don't get heavier sentencing. Or there have been a few stories where the person who committed the murder had been charged with something else and convicted of something else. And you're like, how did they ever get out? And then you realize that's a little frustrating part. And that I know that, there's the problem with the prison overcrowding and everything. So that's a little tough part. I think when you see that somebody has committed a really bad crime more than once, and the second crime winds up being a murder, that's tough to watch.
Has there ever been an interview that didn't go as planned? How did you handle it?
Many celebrity interviews have not gone as planned. I can tell you that. I remember one interview I started off, and I will not name the person, but it just didn't start off right, but it was my fault. I'm gonna admit it was my fault, because he sat down and I knew what he looked like because he was a very famous actor. And I just started off the interview with like, oh my gosh, he looks so much like my ex-husband. And well, that just didn't go over very well. He didn't like the fact that he looked like my ex-husband for some reason. I don't know, it just went downhill from there. And that was, I won't say his name. But yeah, that was funny. But many celebrity interviews, you just never know what is going to happen. It's the ones that you really appreciate the most, I think, that can take a question that maybe is like, something they don't want to answer, but you're going to ask them, and that can turn it into something funny. I mean, I remember like George Clooney was a master of it. Julia Roberts was a master of it. I always say the bigger the celebrity, the better they are at it. But, George Clooney, before he got married to Amal, constantly was being asked, hey, when are you going to get married? And I remember instead of him answering the question, he's like, are you asking me to marry you right now? It's just, he has this great way of turning an awkward question, or a question he doesn't want to answer. I shouldn't say an awkward question because everybody's asking him that, but into something funny and into a soundbite, as we call it, that you can actually use.
You've covered some of the biggest moments in entertainment history. What's been the most unforgettable interview or event for you?
I think I'm aging myself right now because I was there for all these things. But Princess Diana's death, I remember being there to cover that for Access Hollywood, and the craziness of how that all went down and going from one place to the next, and the massive amounts of people who came out, and the flowers that were covering street after street after street. And I remember, the boys walking behind the casket and seeing them right there in front of me. And then later I remember we went to cover Harry and Meghan's wedding, and I was having a flashback to seeing him as a little boy behind Diana's casket. And so just having covered that span, I think I'll never forget those two stories because they just seem so interconnected. And I remember thinking to myself, having covered her funeral, and then how much she probably would have wanted to be at his wedding. And it was just a weird feeling that I had inside.
You meet so many different people. What do you think you've learned about human nature through all of this?
What have I learned about human nature and all of this? I think probably that people just want to be appreciated. I think that the celebrities that I've interviewed, they want you to appreciate their work because they work hard. I think that they want you to appreciate the interview. I think they want to be treated with respect. And I think that goes for, it translates into Crime Exposé as well. It's like the family members, they want you to understand their story. They want you to appreciate their story because it's about their loved one. And then they want to hope that you can help them in some way. So I think probably that is that people just want to be heard and they want to be appreciated. And that's, part of being a journalist because you are telling their stories. So you have a big job in your hands.
Have you ever felt conflicted about the portrayal of a particular case in the media?
One that I covered or one that somebody else covered?
Anyone.
I think that, having covered entertainment, sometimes I would feel conflicted because, as you know, what sells the tabloids, now the shows that I worked for were not tabloids, very credible and respectable shows, but they still want to ask about their love life, and maybe the celebrity just wants to talk about their new album. And I get conflicted on that because I know that they're giving me the courtesy of sitting down because they want to talk about their album, that they've been working on for years after years. And you also want to know, because we love them so much as the celebrities and the entertainers, people are very curious about their personal life. And so it's hard walking that fine line. I think that I have learned to do it in a very respectful way. And sometimes if I've become really good friends with them, we'll talk a little bit about it ahead of time of, do you mind if I go here? Because I do want to respect their boundaries some. And then if they don't want to talk about it, I always say them too. I respect you too. If I ask you a question and you don't want to talk about it, then you can say, I'd prefer not to talk about that. Can we move on? And I will respect that they say that because everybody's a person when it comes down to it, right?
What's the most shocking twist or detail you've uncovered while researching a case?
Let's see. There was one case we did on Crime Exposé, and I just could not believe who the murderer turned out to be. There was this lady, and she was going through a divorce, and she had the kid with her, and she was doing the custody exchange. And she was sitting in her car waiting for her, I forget if he was already her ex or her soon-to-be ex, to come to get the kid. And in the process, while she's waiting, she winds up being murdered. Now, of course, the first suspect is the ex-husband, the father of the child. Didn't turn out that it was that. And it was a person who was dressed up in a clown wig and, had disguised themselves in a big way. But when people would look at it, they felt like it looked more like a woman than a man. And so they showed it to the husband and said, do you know who this could be? And I remember hearing that part of the interview, and I just remember it just kind of flooring me. And he goes, I think that is my mother. And I just remember that just completely shocking me. And so basically it was the mother-in-law, the grandmother, and I just don't understand how some things turn out the way that they do, or how somebody could do something like that.
What do you think makes Crime Exposé stand out from other true crime shows out there?
I think Crime Exposé stands out because it is a half an hour format where if you like true crime, it will take you through a case in a half an hour. So a lot of times people will talk about the true crime shows where they don't necessarily have an hour or they don't have longer to go through the whole case, or if it takes them over a certain amount of episodes. We do it in a half an hour format. So from the beginning to the end, you learn what the murder is, and at the end, you have a resolve. So you're never left hanging. So I think that is something that makes it different. I also think that at the very end, we give a safety spotlight. And so we tell people, like, okay, here's some things that we'll have an expert talk to us, or we'll get the information from an expert, and they will tell us things that people can learn to do to hopefully prevent something from happening to them. And so that makes the show different as well.
How do you handle it when you get emotionally invested in a case, knowing you have to remain neutral?
I get emotionally invested in all of the cases. I tend to feel a lot, and I certainly feel for the people when I'm watching them. How do I handle it? I don't think there's really, you can't. I think that's actually part of, great storytelling, is that when people do see that you have emotion about it. I know you have to maintain your composure and you can't cry when sometimes you feel like you want to cry because the story is sad. It's not live, so if I can't maintain the composure, you could go somewhere else. But I think if you have a little bit of emotion, I think it's okay. I mean, Crime Exposé is going to make you feel something because you do feel bad for these families of something that's happened. It also makes you feel really angry. And so I've noticed that sometimes I'll do my reads a little more stern if I'm talking about something that I am upset about, that somebody committed this crime. So I have to watch that a little bit, but I think it's okay. You show a little bit of emotion because it's an emotional show.
When you're not working, what's something that helps you recharge?
I love sports. So sports always help me recharge. I love to play them. I love to watch them. So I'm a huge fan of my school, which is Clemson University. So I love to watch me some Clemson football. I love all college sports. So that helps me unwind a good bit. I love taking a good bath. I have a standalone bathtub, and I will turn out the lights, put on candles, put on some great music, and sit there in that warm bathtub. And I don't know what it is. I don't know if I feel like I'm back in the womb or something, but it just feels all this warmth surrounded around me, and it just kind of takes me away from everything. And it's really nice. Sometimes I'll click on the television if I don't have like relaxing music on, and I'll watch an episode of, oh, shall I say it? Bachelor. I kind of like it. And The Bachelorette. I get very involved in that show. I think I'm really mostly fascinated by the way they produce that show. That is a very well produced show. It gets you so hooked, and you're like, okay, who's gonna be the villain this season? All right, who's gonna get, you're always guessing who's gonna get the person at the end, and then you're like, are they really gonna last? I mean, it just makes you think a lot, right? But I like the way it's produced. They do a great job. They tease you so great, so that part is fascinating to me, and the way they produce it.
Have you ever had a moment where you had to take a step back and think, wow, I can't believe this is my life?
I have had one of those moments. I didn't set out. I actually majored in marketing, and I worked at the small TV station in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina to begin with. And they had obviously news going on at the station, and there was a weekend where they had this flood, and they needed somebody to cover the flood, and they didn't have anybody who could get in quick enough. And so somebody said, hey, will you go out and just talk about the flood? And I go, I don't know how to do that. And they're like, no, just describe what you're seeing, and just talk about the scenery around you. And it didn't require a ton of experience because it was a smaller market. And so I did it. And after that, they said, hey, do you want to do some more on the weekend for us? And I thought, well, this is a great way to make a little extra money. And so I did, and then I got called by the station in Charleston, South Carolina, and then eventually the one in Miami. So that's actually how I wound up in journalism. So yeah, sometimes I look and think, wow, this is pretty cool. And then I know a couple of times I'll name the specific actors that I've looked over and thought like, wow, I can't believe this is my life. I always feel that way when I'm interviewing Chris Hemsworth.
Who is your biggest inspiration or motivator?
My biggest inspiration or motivator, I would have to say my inspiration would be my mom. She has passed away, but she was literally one of the most selfless, sweetest, kindest people you could ever meet. And so I always said if I could be like half of the mom that she was, I would be an incredible mom because she was such a great mom. So she was very inspirational to me for my most important job, which is being a mom.
How do you start your day?
I start my day with probably about 3 cups of coffee. That doesn't sound very fancy, but I honestly, I get up and first thing I do is go to the coffee machine and, make a nice little coffee, and that seems to get me going. Then I have 3 of the cutest doggies you can ever see, and they're always like, ready to be fed. So that's probably my next task that I have to do. And then I start making breakfast for my daughter. And a lot of people are like, she's 17, you still make breakfast. And I'm like, I only have a few months left. Like, I'm happy to make her breakfast. And then we sit down and we eat it together. And then she's off to school. And I say, let me spoil her while I can, because she's getting ready to go off to college. And then, I won't be able to sit down and have breakfast. And I won't be able to make breakfast for her. And I don't know what I'm going to do with all the extra time that I have.
If you could switch lives with one person for a day,
Okay.
who would it be?
If I could switch lives with one person for a day, I mentioned to you I was very involved with Best Buddies. So my best buddy is Lauren Potter. She is this beautiful young lady. She was an actress on Glee. You're probably familiar with her. She's just an incredible, I still call her a kid, but she's a young lady now. But she is a person with Down syndrome, and I think I would love, because I am so involved in the organization, to step into their shoes one day to know what that is like. And also because she's so inspirational and positive and just a go-getter and a firecracker. And I think then that way it would help me understand like more of what I could do to be involved and to be a better best buddy. And she just, I don't know, she's very inspirational. She and another young lady named Catherine, who is this amazing artist, and she's also a best buddy. I mean, her work is like beyond.
Besides your phone or wallet, what are a couple of must-have handbag items?
Besides my what you said?
Phone or wallet.
Oh, besides my phone or wallet, handbag items. Oh, well, you have to have an air tag to find your phone or wallet, right? Because I consistently lose mine everywhere. Anybody in my life will tell you that. So I have air tags on everything. I even have air tags on my dogs.
Best place to eat in LA.
Best place to eat in LA. We go to this restaurant called El Pastel in Beverly Hills. And anytime we're over on the west side, I don't live on the west side, my daughter and I love to go there because they have this, I think it's homemade pasta, and they take this huge cheese wheel and they take the pasta when it's like steaming hot and they pull it out right in front of you and they circulate it all around this big cheese wheel. And I mean, your mouth starts watering, and then they put it on the plate and they sprinkle a little truffle. And my daughter and I both like, it's the most incredible thing. We always go there for special celebrations. So we recently went there for my birthday.
What's the one talent you wish you had?
I wish that I could sing. I can't sing. I also wish that I could whistle this way, because I can't. I can whistle this way all day long, but I can't go, nothing will come out. I'm like, what am I doing wrong? So I want to learn how to whistle that way, and I want to be able to sing. And I mentioned to you, I want to be an artist. My sister's this incredible artist, and I wish I could draw. I could do a stick figure at best.
What's something you don't want to be doing in 10 years?
Working? No, I'm just kidding. Something I don't want to be doing in 10 years. Maybe not fighting LA traffic. I mean, there's a big part of me and everybody in my life who knows me knows this, but while LA has such wonderful parts to it and is incredible, and beautiful beaches and beautiful weather, it's just, I think growing up in South Carolina, North Carolina, I kind of crave for a simpler life. I say I want a peaceful life. I want a simple life. I want not to spend an hour getting somewhere. So I think that I would love to be back maybe in the Carolinas at least by 10 years from now. Plus my daughter's going to school there, so I got to go and, be near her. But she won't be in school in 10 years from now, right? So I would say maybe that's one thing, is that I would like to maybe go back to the Carolinas. I think it would be fun. It's just a simpler way of living for me. For some people, they might not like that, but I tend to like it. In LA, I don't want to put LA down because I do love LA. There's so many great things about it, but traffic is one that gets to me.
What's the best thing that's happened this year?
The best thing that has happened this year professionally would have to be Crime Exposé. Again, it's so exciting because it's this idea that, I came up with producers that I love so much, and we have the best time working together, and all the people involved, some of them here right now. We have such a fun time together. It doesn't feel stressful. It feels like a good day at work. Every single day was a good day at work. And we would work hard and have really long days, but it's just with such this incredible crew, and they're always so friendly. And we were having to get through these hard stories, but we did it in such a way that we really enjoyed each other. And then we were really pleased with the product and happy with the product, and watching the show and seeing it after and seeing how that all came together and how we put it together. I mean, I would have to say professionally for sure, Crime Exposé, and the fact that this idea that we had came about and went to air, and it's been a nice journey. And being able to go back to my roots, that's something that I always said that I was gonna do, having started in the crime and police beat, and I found it fascinating, all the investigation and the cops and the detectives, as I've mentioned. Being able to go back to that is something I've always wanted to do. So to see that happening has been exciting.
Which movie makes you laugh the hardest?
I would say Kevin Hart and Jumanji with Dwayne Johnson. I mean, is such a fun actor, and just his expressions sometimes. I mean, I can't stop laughing. I think that's funny. And then the birds and Finding Nemo, mine, they make me laugh every single time.
Who do you turn to when you're sad?
Who do I turn to when I'm sad? A couple of people. I have my sister, who I'm very close with, so she always gets a phone call if I'm sad. My daughter, and I have a really good friend who is like my sister, and she constantly gets phone calls if I feel sad, and she always cheers me up, because sometimes you just need somebody to talk to. So I'd say those three people.
What's a trend you would like to see disappear forever?
Trend that I would like to see disappear forever. I'm gonna say, as much as I love them, but this is why I need it to disappear, because I'm addicted to them, is those word of the days on Instagram. Those word of the days where they take the two words, like I told you, ambiguous, right? Ambiguous is the word, they combine them. They do such a good job of it that I'm constantly addicted to it. Like, I'll sit there and I'm like a teen. I am addicted to Instagram and seeing the word of the day, because it's just so clever how they combine these two words together. But it takes up too much of my time, because I find it so funny that I need the trend to go away.
Is there anything you want to tell the viewers?
Well, I would like the viewers to watch Crime Exposé, obviously. It's right here on this station, right? And I think that they will really enjoy it. And obviously, that is what I'm working on the most right now. So if you are a viewer and maybe you've watched Entertainment Tonight or Access Hollywood, know that I'm on Crime Exposé with Nancy O'Dell, and it airs in 97% of the country, so you'll be able to find it anywhere you are. And I think you'll find it fascinating. We take you on quite the journey, and you learn something at the end, which can help everybody. But I think you'll enjoy it, because it is a 30-second condensed version of a story, but done in a way that you certainly aren't left feeling like you need more. You get the story from beginning to end.
What's your rating of The Sit?
On a scale of 10, 15. You guys are awesome. Everybody's so friendly, great questions. I'll come back anytime. Thanks for having me. A lot of fun. Wait, what just happened? Are we having an earthquake? It is LA.